In this video, we continue our discussion of the Play framework using Scala. We've gotten to the point where we have just enough of a model that we can validate a user when they log in or not validate them. And we have a controller that checks whether the user data is accurate and either sends them forward to the task list or sends them back to the login page, depending upon whether or not it worked. There are now two routes that we could take. We could either add the functionality to, or add to our model the ability to create a new user, and then we'd have to add parts into the website to make that work. Or we could add in the ability to look up the tasks of a user and then incorporate those into our task list. I'm a big fan of taking whatever the smallest step is that gives us something that is functional, and it turns out get tasks is a little bit easier. Now, in order to write get tasks, I need a place to store the tasks. This is not holding it for me. So I'm going to come into here and I'm going to add another private val. We'll call it tasks. And it will be a mutable map of string, once again the username here. But now I'm going to have it go to a list of string. And while this returns a sequence of string, list is a subtype of sequence. And I know that lists are efficient to cons onto, so I'm going to go with a list here, and I will build on it by consing. I'm also going to put some dummy data in here. Since Mark is the only username that can log in right now, it's the one that makes sense to have inside of here. And we can put in a list of strings, make videos, eat, sleep, code. Okay, so we've got some tasks. What should get tasks do? Well, the simplest implementation would just be tasks sub username. And if we write all of our code correctly, this would be sufficient, because when this is called, the username really should exist. Problem is, if the username doesn't exist, this throws an exception. I want this to be a little bit more robust. So I'm going to call .get as we did before. Now I have an option of the list of strings. And I'm going to do a get or else with nil. So if the user doesn't exist, we'll just give back an empty list. They don't get to see anything. If they do exist, we give back their list. Let's go to our controller. And I want to update my task list. So right now it's hard-coded to return a set of tasks. I'm instead, there's still going to be hard coding here. I'm going to push the hard coding up one line. I'm going to hard code our username as Mark, and then in the in-memory model, I will get the tasks for username and return that. Okay, once again, we can only log in as Mark, and we'll be getting marks. We haven't talked about how to pass the data between these two. We'll come back and do that in the next video. That will require session variables. But I want to see if this works. So let's come back to our login page and let's refresh, see if I messed anything up. This seems like an abnormally long compile, but there we go. Okay. Mark, pass. That's the only thing that will work for the login right now. Well, isn't that interesting? Oh, okay. I've been playing around too much with my SBT and reloading stuff. That's why it took so long. We've hit some issues. Never have this happen in a distributed version, but okay. Let's go back to our login one. Server's up. It compiles. There we go. Much faster response. That's my new list. Okay, make videos, eat, sleep, code. That list only appears inside of my model right now. Now, of course, it's hard-coded inside my model, but we'll get around that in the future. Okay, so get tasks works, and it is all stitched together to give us the data we want. The other functionality that we could add is the ability to create a user. Now, in order to be able to create a user, the code here in the model really isn't that hard. Okay, so we have users, and we can say, well, if the user already exists, we don't get to add them. Otherwise, we're going to add them and say that we added them. Okay, so if users dot contains the key of username, all we do is give back false. Else, well, if the username is not contained, that means this is new. So I'm going to take users sub-username and set it equal to the password that was passed in and give back true to say that this actually worked. Okay, we have a model with the method for creating a user. Now, where would this be called? In order for this to be called, we need another action in here. We need a route to it, and we need something in our login page to get to it. Now, we could have actually made a separate page. I could have a link on login that goes to a create user, or I could simply take the form for my validate login post, and I am just going to change this text here to say create user, and we'll change this here to say that it calls create user. And one of the things I like about this is, remember, this doesn't exist. I showed you several times how typing in the wrong link causes these subtle bugs, and I said reverse routing is the better way to do this. We can show how much better it is by hitting refresh here and seeing that we actually get a compile error. Okay, this is why the reverse routing is awesome, because if I try to refer to a method that doesn't exist, it's not in the routes. In fact, in order for it to be found, it has to A, be here. So I have to have def create user, and I'll start off by making that a to-do. And I have to have an appropriate path. So create user, 1, controllers, task list, create user. We've seen before that the posts need a plus no CSRF. We'll come back in a later video and I'll tell you why that is. For now, we're just going to duplicate it. Actually, in the future, we'll fix this the better way. And let's go ahead and refresh this. And so if I were to go back to my login page here and refresh it, now I have a create user, and when I submit it, I should go to a to-do. Excellent. We're getting close. So what needs to happen in create user? Well, it turns out what needs to happen here is almost the same thing that needed to happen in the validating a user. It is submitting a form as a post, okay, and we need to decode the body. We need to get a username and a password out of that body. We don't want to call validate user though. We want to call create user with the username and the password. If it returns true, that will have created it. Forwarding to the task list is fine. If it returns false, we'll do a login because it was an existing username. Note that whether this returns task list or login is kind of up to you. There are some websites where when you create a user, you go back to the login page and you have to log in as that user. Others will direct you straight in. Part of that is if a website needs to validate your email before letting you in, letting you straight in is a significant security risk for them. For our purposes, I'm willing to just forward straight on to the task list. So this will create a user and hopefully go to the right place. Now the tasks are still always going to be from Mark because we haven't talked about how to pass the information between these two. That'll be, once again, our next video. But we can at least test this. We can go to our login page. We can refresh it. Now remember, the only login that has been working for us is Mark with pass. So I'm going to create a different login. Well, that took us to this page, but we don't know that we had the right user. If this worked, I should now be able to do a login with that username and password, and that worked. Note that if I put in a different password, it fails. If I type in something random, it fails and directs us back here. Okay, excellent. So at this point, we have a model that allows us to create users, to log in. The login is validated. It shows us tasks, not the right tasks, not the tasks for that user. That'll be the next video. And then we want to have the ability to add and delete. So we're getting close. We're getting a lot of the functionality in for our little web app. Just a few more videos and we should have something that is completely functional.